The wind shrieked across the desert floor like a banshee, whipping sand into spiraling columns that vanished into the smog of distant wildfire smoke. Overhead, the chopper cut a low, throbbing arc through the sky, blades slicing the air with mechanical defiance. Jack Harmon gripped the control stick with steady hands, eyes narrowed beneath bushy gray brows. The sun glinted off the windshield, casting the world in flickers of gold and ash. He had flown rescue missions for 40 years, across jungles, battlefields, hurricanes, but this one was different. It was supposed to be routine, a flyover to document displaced wildlife after the flash floods. No passengers, no cargo, just one man and the ghosts he no longer outran. Below him, the land stretched endlessly, charred brush, fractured mesas, and dry gulches carved by water that no longer came. Then he saw it. A shape, small at first, moving fast, not away from the helicopter, but toward it. He blinked, leaned forward, squinting past the layers of glare and distance. A Mustang, slate gray, built like it had outrun lightning itself. But it wasn't running wild. It was running with purpose. The horse tore through the desert, muscles rippling under a hide smeared with ash. It weaved past scorched trees, its hooves carving deep into the sand. Head up, eyes locked on the aircraft overhead. Jack's fingers tightened on the stick. What in the hell? He muttered. He banked lower. The Mustang never flinched. Most wild horses scattered at the sound of a helicopter, spooked by the thunder and wind. But this one surged forward, nostrils flared, neck stretched like it was trying to reach him. Then it stopped. Abruptly. Just stood there, chest heaving. Dust swirled around it, like a storm frozen in time. Jack hovered, staring. There was something in the horse's eyes, not fear, not panic, but something uncannily human. Desperation. Urgency. A plea. The radio crackled in his ear. Recon 1, status check. You picking up anything unusual? He hesitated. Yeah, he said finally. I've got eyes on a lone Mustang, not behaving like the others. It ran toward me, not away. A pause. Then, copy that. You want to mark the coordinates and move on. Jack looked again. The Mustang hadn't moved. It was still staring at him, not blinking, as if waiting. No, he said. I'm putting her down. That's not protocol, Jack. You sure? But Jack had already begun descending. The rotor wash stirred up a chaos of sand and char, but the Mustang didn't budge. The skids kissed earth. Jack powered down, ears ringing in the sudden absence of turbine whine. He opened the side door, heat slamming into him like a furnace. He stepped out slowly, hands visible. No sudden moves. He wasn't sure why he was treating this like a negotiation. But something told him. This wasn't just a horse. He took a few cautious steps forward. The Mustang snorted, pawed the earth, but didn't retreat. Jack could see it clearer now. Scars around its neck, faint and old, like it had once worn a rope far too tight. A burn mark near the shoulder, a partial brand, faded and cruel. You've been through hell, Jack whispered. The horse tossed its head, then turned, cantering a few paces before stopping again. It looked back, waiting. Jack's heart kicked. You want me to follow you? He'd been alone for years, since the day his wife died, and he didn't make it home in time, since his daughter stopped calling, since he started choosing the sky over people, again and again. But this wasn't about him. This was about whatever the Mustang was trying to show. He followed. The air grew thicker the deeper he went, terrain sloping into a narrow canyon veiled by smoke. Cracks in the rocks still steamed from wildfire heat. Every step was deliberate. He didn't know where the horse was taking him, until he did. A tree, snapped clean at the base, lay across the ravine's edge. Beneath its blackened limbs, something moved. Small, shaking, a foal. Jack's breath caught. The filly was trapped under part of the trunk, legs kicking weakly, eyes wild with panic. Ash caked her coat. Blood streaked her shoulder. The gray stallion, because that's what it was now clearly, stood beside her, nuzzling her flank gently, then backing away, making room for Jack. He knelt beside the foal. Easy, sweetheart. I got you. He slid his hands under the branch, testing the weight. Too heavy to lift outright. He needed leverage. He scanned the canyon, spotted a long piece of metal rebar lodged in stone, probably storm debris. Minutes later, he pried the branch just enough for the filly to wriggle free. She stumbled, fell, tried again. The stallion was instantly beside her, nudging, encouraging. Jack watched in awe. There was no wild rage here. No panic. Just love. A father's love. He pulled out his radio. "Base, this is Recon 1. I've found an injured foal. She's stable but needs evac. Sending coordinates now." He stayed crouched beside them as the sun began to dip. The canyon bathed in gold, the air quiet but for breathing theirs. The stallion stepped closer to Jack, close enough that Jack could hear its breath. It didn't flinch when he raised his hand slowly. Their eyes met. Jack saw the scarred past, the earned strength, the trust not easily given. And the stallion saw something else. Jack didn't know what, but it felt like forgiveness. He swallowed hard. "I'll get her help. I promise." The stallion blinked, then stepped back. And in that moment Jack Harmon, former combat pilot, broken husband, distant father, felt something shift. The sky was no longer a place to escape. It was a place to return from. And the Mustang? He wasn't running toward the helicopter. He was running toward hope. The foal lay curled beside the canyon wall, flanks rising in shallow breaths. Her eyes fluttered, still glassy with fear, but there was life in them now, fragile, flickering, but real. Jack crouched nearby, shielding her from the worst of the heat with his jacket, half spread like makeshift shade. The stallion stood a few feet away, silent but vigilant, his body tense and alert to every move Jack made. The canyon around them was unervingly quiet, the kind of silence that comes after disaster. Occasional gusts stirred loose ash and brittle leaves, but the air felt hollow, like sound itself was holding its breath. Jack checked his watch. 40 minutes since his radio call. Too long. The satellite relay in this region was weak, patchy. He'd sent coordinates, but whether they had gone through, he couldn't be sure. He considered trying again, but hesitated. Too much movement might spook the stallion. So instead, he waited, his thoughts drifting in uncomfortable directions. He looked at the stallion again. There was something deeper behind those eyes, awareness that went beyond instinct. It had chosen to run toward the helicopter, to bring him here. That wasn't chance. That wasn't fear. That was intention. Jack's fingers traced a circle into the dust. He remembered his daughter's words years ago, during one of their final arguments. Asterisk, "You always leave, Dad. When it gets too hard, you choose altitude over people." Asterisk, she was right, and he knew it even then. After the car crash that took his wife, he never really came home. His body returned, yes, but the rest of him, heart, mind, soul, remained somewhere in the clouds. And now here he was, grounded by a horse that somehow reminded him what it meant to care again. The filly stirred. A small cry escaped her, high-pitched and raw. The stallion stepped closer instantly, lowering his head until his muzzle touched her mane. She quieted. Jack blinked back the sting in his eyes. "You're not just a father," he said softly to the stallion. "You're a survivor." He rose to his feet slowly, approaching the Mustang with steady hands. The stallion held his ground, but his ears twitched. Jack moved to the side, circling slightly to get a better view of the animal's left shoulder. The light caught it just right this time. There it was. A brand. Not fully legible, scorched and half erased by injury, but enough to tell the truth. A ranch mark. Faded letters, barely discernible. M7. Jack didn't need a database to know what it meant. M7 Ranch, an outfit notorious for rough handling, later shut down after an abuse scandal a decade ago. This stallion had once belonged to someone. It had been taken, likely broken with force, then either sold or escaped. Somehow, it had survived in the wild, rejoined a herd, and lived with pain etched into its body like an old map. And yet here it stood, fiercely loyal, deeply protective, and trusting. At least enough to let Jack near. He reached up slowly. The stallion flinched, but didn't retreat. Jack's fingers brushed the tangled, dusty mane. No resistance. No panic. Just acceptance. His earpiece crackled suddenly. Recon 1, This is base. We got your coordinates. Dispatch is on the way. ETA 25 minutes. Hold position. Jack pressed his mic. Copy that. Injured foal stable, but needs medical attention. Adult Mustang is present, non-aggressive. Roger. Vet unit en route. Anything else? Jack looked at the stallion, then at the filly. Yeah. Bring my daughter. A pause. Say again. He exhaled. Dr. Claire Harmon. She's with the wildlife recovery team, isn't she? I want her on this one. Understood. Will advise. He lowered his hand, stepping back, giving the Mustang space again. The animal resumed its post beside the foal, as if Jack had never moved. He sat down on a nearby rock, every bone in his body aching, not just from age, but from the slow weight of realization. All these years he'd convinced himself it was too late, that he'd already lost too much to go back. But here was this stallion, carrying scars older than some men's regrets, who had still chosen to reach out for help, not for itself, but for its child. What excuse did he have? The sun had dropped lower, shadows lengthening across the canyon floor, when the faint thump of rotor blades returned to the sky. The stallion's ears flicked toward the sound. He didn't bolt. Instead, he moved to stand between the helicopter and the filly, protective as ever. A sleek rescue chopper landed on the flat above the ravine. Dust erupted in curtains. Jack climbed up to guide them down. As the team descended, one figure broke from the group before the others. Helmet off, boots crunching with urgency, Claire. She didn't look at him at first. Her eyes were locked on the scene. The filly lying half-curled in the dirt, the stallion standing guard like a sentinel carved from stone. She dropped to her knees beside the foal and immediately got to work. Vitals are faint but stable. No spinal damage. Lacerations need cleaning. Probably dehydrated. Jack watched in silence as she worked, her hands practiced, gentle. The stallion let her approach with remarkable calm, as if sensing her purpose. Only after she finished prepping the foal for transport did she turn to him. You were the first on scene, she asked. He nodded. I was doing a recon pass. Saw him running toward the chopper. Followed him here. Claire looked back at the stallion, then at Jack again. He ran toward you? Jack's voice cracked, just slightly. He didn't run away from the noise. He ran toward it, like he knew it meant help. Claire's eyes softened. For a moment, the weight of the years between them hung heavy in the air. Then she whispered, almost to herself, some animals know more than we give them credit for. He took a small step closer. I think he once belonged to someone. I saw the brand. M7. Claire stiffened. Then he survived hell to get here. They stood in silence as the team lifted the filly onto the stretcher, readying her for airlift. Jack looked at the stallion one last time. The animal's eyes met his again, unwavering, and Jack felt something shift inside, an unspoken truth settling into place. He didn't just save that filly. He'd been rescued too. The wind pressed against the recovery center's open field as the stallion stood enclosed behind a reinforced gate, eyes tracking every movement with a quiet intensity. He hadn't flinched during the journey, not even when the filly was lifted into the air by harness and stretcher. Jack had ridden with her in the chopper, while Claire remained on the ground to supervise the stallion's tranquilized capture. Now, 2 days later, the stallion remained strong, unbroken, and terrifyingly still, as if waiting for something only he understood. Jack leaned on the railing, watching him. The scars along the horse's neck and flanks were clearer in daylight, stark against his dappled coat. Jack had seen those marks before, on soldiers, on animals, on himself. The kind that didn't always bleed, but never fully healed. Claire approached, clipboard tucked under her arm. He won't eat unless the filly's nearby. We tried everything. He just stands there like this, hours at a time. Jack glanced over, still protecting her. Claire nodded, eyes soft. He won't even lie down. Silence sat between them for a moment, heavy but not hostile. They're calling him Phantom, she said. Jack smiled faintly. Fitting. He's a ghost of someone's cruelty, and somehow still found a way to love. She said it without looking at Jack, but the words hit like a quiet blow. He lowered his gaze. Claire scribbled something, then turned to leave, but paused mid-step. "You know," she said quietly, "I've watched the video." Jack tilted his head. "The helmet footage. The moment he ran toward you. The way he circled back when you didn't follow immediately." Jack nodded once. "Yeah, I keep watching that too." "It's strange," she said. "Most wild animals flee when they see something bigger, louder. But it's like he recognized the helicopter." Jack turned slowly to face her. "What if he did?" Claire raised an eyebrow. "You think someone trained him using aircraft?" He shrugged. "Maybe. Or maybe he just remembered what rescue looked like." She looked down, thoughtful. Or what abandonment felt like. They didn't speak for a long time after that. The air was thick with things left unsaid. That night, Jack stayed in the monitoring station, unable to sleep. He watched the stallion pacing in grainy black and white surveillance, tail twitching, muscles taut. Whenever the filly stirred in her adjacent pen, he moved closer, nose pressed to the divider. There was no sound, only image, but it didn't need words. Every gesture was a sentence. Jack opened a side drawer and pulled out the old, creased photo he kept folded into his wallet's last slot. Claire, maybe 11 or 12, smiling beside a rescued dog, arms wrapped around it like she'd found a missing part of herself. His wife had taken that picture. Back when everything still made sense. He sat there in the quiet, guilt flickering behind his eyes like a low flame. He could fly through storms, navigate fire, drop into canyons, but he'd never learned how to land where it mattered most. Not with her. The following morning, Claire found him in the barn, sitting just outside the filly's stall. His jacket was draped over his shoulders, coffee in hand. The filly was resting now, eyes closed, wounds mended with tight rows of stitches and healing salves. "She's doing better," Claire said, kneeling beside him. Heart rate steady. Appetites returned. "Because he's near," Jack replied. Claire gave a soft smile. "He hasn't left that spot once." They both looked over at Phantom. He stood unmoving, just beyond the gate, watching his daughter breathe. "You ever wonder what he'd be like if someone hadn't ruined him first?" Jack asked. Claire's response came slowly. "I wonder the same about people." The words hung between them, soft but sharp. Jack turned to her, expression unreadable. "I wasn't there when your mom died," he said. "Not really. Not in the way that counted." Claire looked down. "I thought flying made me brave. That maybe if I stayed in the air long enough, I wouldn't have to touch ground where it hurt." Claire met his eyes. "But it always hurts on the ground, doesn't it?" He nodded. "Yeah." They sat in silence, surrounded by quiet breathing and the soft rustle of hay. No dramatic reconciliation. No flood of tears. Just the slow mending of something that had long been frayed. Later that afternoon, Jack stood near Phantom's gate, holding a saddle blanket gently in his arms. Not to ride, not yet. Just a gesture. A symbol of trust. Claire stood a few feet away, clipboard forgotten, watching. Jack didn't enter the pen. Instead, he sat just outside, folding the blanket carefully and laying it near the gate, within reach but not forced. Phantom eyed it, unmoving. "Choice," Jack said aloud. "He deserves that. After everything." The stallion took a hesitant step forward. Then another. Dust shifted beneath his hooves. He sniffed the blanket, then looked up at Jack. There was something ancient in that gaze, something that had endured fire, fear, and grief. Jack lowered his eyes, not as an act of submission, but respect. Phantom stepped closer, pressed his muzzle gently against the bars. Jack extended a hand. Ferment skin. Stillness passed like a blessing through the fence. Claire let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. And just like that, something shifted. Not loudly, not suddenly, but undeniably. When Jack stood, Phantom didn't move away. For the first time in years, Jack felt grounded, not by weight, but by connection. Not tied down, but held still in a place he didn't want to leave. He turned to Claire. She smiled. There were no big words. No perfect phrases. Just presence. Just a beginning. Outside, the sky deepened into violet. The world quieted. And for once, Jack didn't run from it. The video spread faster than anyone expected. Within 48 hours, Over 10 million people had seen the footage of a gray stallion galloping through smoke toward a rescue helicopter. The opening frame, a wide aerial shot of a devastated canyon, faded into the image of the horse charging forward, eyes burning with purpose, as though the aircraft carried the only hope he had left. No words, just the haunting echo of rotor blades and the image of raw determination. Viewers across the world wept. Some called it instinct. Others called it a miracle. But everyone agreed. It was something no one could forget. Jack watched the final cut from a quiet bench outside the recovery center. The team had included his helmet cam footage, shaky but intimate, of the moment he found the foal under the tree. The tenderness of the stallion, the panic in his own voice, the trust exchanged in silence. He never intended to become part of the story, but the world had seen him anyway. The reluctant rescuer, the man who'd been called by a horse. Claire sat beside him, phone in hand, watching reactions scroll past in real time. Someone in Montana wants to sponsor the filly's rehabilitation. There's a school in Vermont planning to show the video during a lesson on empathy. And a retired vet from Texas says he hasn't cried in 20 years, until now. Jack smiled faintly. All that because one horse chose not to run away. Claire nodded. He remembered what too many of us forget, that asking for help isn't weakness. They rose and walked together toward the enclosure where Phantom stood, posture strong, but eyes softer now. The stallion had begun to accept the touch of caretakers, though no one could approach him like Jack could. Each morning, he would come to the gate when Jack appeared, as though the connection forged in the canyon had never been broken. Inside the adjacent pen, the filly grazed on clover, her wounds all but healed. She walked with a slight limp, a scar along her flank catching the morning sun, but her spirit was unshaken. Claire had named her Ember. Jack opened the gate slowly and stepped inside Phantom's enclosure. The stallion met him halfway, head lowered. Jack placed a halter gently over his neck. No resistance. They had been practicing this moment for days. Each step forward earned through patience, not pressure. He led Phantom through the gate, past Ember, and into the open field behind the center. Grass stretched wide beneath the spring sky, the land humming with possibility. Claire followed at a distance, clipboard tucked under her arm. "You're ready for this?" Jack gave a small nod. "He is." He unclipped the lead rope. Phantom stood still, blinking at the space ahead. Then he moved, slow at first, walking in long, deliberate strides, then gradually picking up speed. Jack and Claire watched as the stallion broke into a gallop, his mane catching the breeze, his hooves thundering across earth that welcomed him. Ember neighed from behind the fence. Phantom halted mid-run, turned, and trotted back toward her. He paused just outside her pen, nuzzling her through the wooden slats. Claire stepped forward, touched Jack's shoulder. He still remembers why he ran that day. Jack nodded. It wasn't just instinct. It was love. The words hung between them, simple but full. Later that afternoon, Claire handed Jack a small package. He opened it slowly. Inside was a leather-bound journal, embossed with the word flight. "I figured," she said, "you spent enough time running from the past. Maybe it's time you wrote a new story." Jack thumbed through the empty pages. "Not sure I know how." She smiled. "Start with the day a horse ran toward a helicopter." They stood together by the railing again, watching the two horses graze side by side in the open pasture. The sun sank low, washing everything in golden warmth. The world felt suspended between endings and beginnings. Claire turned to her father, quieter now. "You know, for years I thought I'd never understand you. I thought maybe you loved danger more than you loved us." Jack swallowed. "I didn't know how to stay. Flying, it was easier than facing the mess I left behind." "But you came back," she said. "I didn't, not really," he corrected. "He brought me back." They both looked at Phantom, who raised his head then, as if sensing their gaze. His ears twitched. A second later, Ember trotted forward, and the two horses began to run, not away, but together, side by side, unbroken. In that moment, Jack felt something settle inside him, a stillness he hadn't known he needed. For the first time in decades, the sky didn't call to him. The earth held him instead. Claire linked her arm with his, and they turned to walk back toward the center, the sunset behind them casting long shadows, shadows that didn't haunt anymore, just followed quietly. As they reached the doorway, Jack paused. He looked back one more time. Phantom stood atop a small rise, the wind teasing his mane, his silhouette proud against the horizon. Then, in a movement both startling and gentle, he turned his head, just slightly, toward Jack. A quiet nod. Jack raised his hand in return. No words, just the understanding between two beings who had run from pain, only to discover that true strength wasn't in running, but in turning back and staying.